Walking to the meeting across the city parking lot, the impervious surface, the fresh smell of cut grass. It's nice to have that smell instead of snow.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one.
Okay, we open our meetings with public comment. We have 2 minutes per speaker allocated. Is there anybody wishing to address the county board on a public comment?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd just like to introduce Ben Klinger, our new emergency management director. Ben took over 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
2 weeks ago, he moved up through the ranks. He started out as a transport officer in the jail and then jailer. And lastly, he was our training officer / jail programmer, and now our emergency management.
Wow, it's going to be a
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Who do we have to fill your other position? That's the
That's the question.
yeah.
I'm excited to get started and work with everybody. Last 2 weeks I've been trying to get up to speed on everything, meeting with all kind of the stakeholders and reviewing the emergency plan so that I'm up to speed. So
Good. Great. Welcome to your new capacity.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And hopefully you haven't scheduled any emergencies. Thank you.
Or any vacations.
I do have a second thing.
Yes.
Today is our jail inspection. So if Steve Buswell has to leave, it's because the inspector has showed up. We didn't have a scheduled time, but it's supposed to be today.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to address the county board?
Kate Qualley, Planning and Environmental Services Director. I got a call right before the meeting saying that Daryl Buck was detained today from the Soil and Water Conservation District, but he asked me to make an announcement to the board that May 3rd was the 80th anniversary of the Soil and Water Conservation District. It started out as a Burns Homer Pleasant SWCD, and it was the first in the state. So he wanted that noted for the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the county board? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on. Item 3, approval of the county board minutes from April 24th.
Move to approve?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Kavesi to approve the meeting minutes, April 24th. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. Consent business. And consent comments and approval of the agenda. Is there anything to add, Mr. Fritz? Commissioner Kavesi.
I'd like to pull item 5.2 out of consent business and also 5.4.
5.2
We
and
need some discussion.
5.4. So we will make 5.2 6.A and make 5.4 6.B.
Sure.
That works. Okay. Commissioner Pomeroy? Commissioner Olson?
Were you going to change
Yes, we were going to move, right.
6.3 to 6.2?
6.3 is the Port Authority parking agreement, so we will make that for time of our other governing body. Should we make that should we discuss that first under general business?
Sure.
Is everybody agreeable to that? Okay, so I guess we'll make that A and then we'll move B and the others to B and C.
Okay.
All right?
We're going to make our staff wait and pay them, and then
Yeah, we're willing partners in this endeavor.
all right,
Anything, Commissioner Jacob?
nothing.
Or Attorney Sonoman?
Just one announcement.
Announcement? Okay.
So I have an announcement also,
Okay.
if I'm allowed to have a PS.
Okay, announcements, yes. All right. With those changes, I need a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Pomeroy, second by Commissioner Olson to approve the amended agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. All right. Mr. Fritz, if you would read the consent business.
Okay, I'll read the consent business into the record. Committee recommendations accept Department of Agriculture grant for landowner assistance in the removal of Oriental bittersweet. It's 5.1, sorry. 5.2 has been pulled and is now 6.B. Okay. 5.3, approve conditional use permit for Gary and Nola Dunn to allow construction of a home on less than 40 acres. Department recommendations, 5.4 has been pulled and is now 6.C. 5.5 is approved application for club on-sale retail liquor license. 5.6 is approved resolution authorizing execution of transfer of funds agreement. 5.7, approve LG 220 gambling application for exempt permit Pickwick Fire and Rescue. 5.8 is approved renewal of grant agreement with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. 5.9, approved purchase of services agreement with Family Service Rochester, Inc. for Family Access Center services. 5.10 is approve adding CASA 22 preservation project to 2018 Road and Bridge CIP with $105,000 of funding from the sales tax. 5.11 is award bid of highway pavement markings to AAA Striping Service Company. 5.12 is has that been pulled? Yeah.
No.
That has been pulled. Okay. 5.12 is award bid for annual supply of gasoline and diesel fuel to Severson Oil Company. 5.13, approved International Union of Operating Engineers Local Number 49 amendment. 5.14, confirm payment of disbursements.
I move to approve.
Sorry.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion made by Commissioner Pomeroy, seconded by Commissioner Jacob to approve the consent business as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. Now going to originally 6.3, discuss, reject Winona County Port Authority parking agreement proposed changes.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that. The city representatives and myself met and discussed the parking arrangement that the county has for the spaces, 24 spaces in the main square parking area, the old Hardee's parking area. The county has an agreement with the city where the city provides, well, it's actually with the Port Authority, where they provide 24 spaces to the county for employee parking. The agreement indicates that if they develop that lot, then they can move the spaces within 2 blocks of the government center. So we worked out, we discussed and worked on some changes to the original agreement that would provide for that. They identified the parking areas were acceptable, and that went to the Port Authority. It had several changes to the original agreement. I had proposed that some changes as well. The Port Authority approved the agreement without those changes which I had recommended, or at least one of them, but included the changes that the city had recommended. The Port Authority sent that agreement to the county board for consideration, and you've got that in your packet. Basically, I'm asking that the county board consider just going back to the original agreement rather than approving the agreement that was forwarded by the Port Authority, and accept the 24 spaces in the locations that the city's proposing.
Discussion?
I would move to approve the prior agreement with the new spaces as identified.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made to approve staying with the prior agreement with the spaces
That are newly
designated within that 2-block
Right.
area.
Right, the spaces on 4th and Main and the spaces by the co-op.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm crystal clear, that's your recommendation.
Yeah, the original agreement allowed for the movement. It doesn't have any of the other qualifying terms or anything that were added to the agreement. So if we just rely on that, the city has the right to move the parking spaces to within 2 blocks. The locations are acceptable. Just, in my mind, no need to enhance the agreement or anything like that with additional language. We just go back and live with the original agreement, which we already are party to.
Yes.
I do have a question. So the original agreement was executed in 2007. So this is how many years?
It's a 30-year agreement, so it goes through.
But will the new agreement start a new 30-year, or have we already used up basically a third?
We already used up a portion of it. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if that's the best, so it'd be a 20-year agreement, basically, or
Well,
less, 18
It's a balance of what's left.
left. But I mean, if it's time to renegotiate, then it's time to look at the length of the term of the contract, too.
Well, that would be an option. We could talk about renegotiating the terms, and in essence, that's what we did when we talked about the proposal to keep the 11 spaces through the 19 years that are left on the contract. The city or the Port Authority rejected that proposal. We didn't really open up the agreement to discussions of the equity of the agreement, based on the original, decisions and so forth. We just tried to work with the movement of the spaces. It would be an option, but I think it's going to prolong that discussion somewhat. And I know they're eager to develop that lot, and there is a significant, improvement in the tax base if that lot gets, improved. And so I think it's probably in the best interest of the county and the city to, just move the spaces and let it be.
Okay. Well, I just want it duly noted that I think we should extend the length. But,
Yeah, I got
okay.
it.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Approved. All right. So the city and the county will work out the final details.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right. Now going back to item 5.2. Approve conditional use permit for Severson Oil and the Great River Land Investment to allow the placement of a propane bulk storage facility. Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, I attended the Planning Commission meeting, and there was quite a bit of discussion on this particular conditional use permit, and quite a bit of input from neighbors. One issue that I wanted, there's actually two issues that are still kind of left, I think, on the table. One, I think, is pretty much in agreement. I'm talking about page 29. It adds the following conditions to the conditional use permit that the Planning Commission has recommended. Item number 6 says the petitioner shall submit a landscape plan in accordance with the Winona County zoning ordinance for screening along the property adjacent to or in view from residential property. There was also some discussion about water runoff, and there was some discussion about having some landscaping, perhaps with some deep-rooted native plants that would deter some of that water runoff, because it's running off into the farmer's field. And I don't think that's acceptable. So I would like to add to item 6 that a screening plan be a plan for screening and a plan for, gosh, I don't know how to word it, for water.
Can I help?
Yes.
We had the same discussion, and I did discuss with Kay, and I did discuss with
Right,
Mr.
I did talk with
Severson.
Mr. Severson.
Maybe the intent is a water detention landscape plantings, meaning these deep-rooted plants to absorb and allow
Right.
the water.
Just to see if we can limit that amount of runoff, because I think that's, no farmer wants runoff.
So not only screenings, but water detention landscape
Yeah.
planting.
So I guess, I don't know if we want to, I have one more comment on another condition, but do we want to pass this condition first, or pass this change in the condition, or just do the whole package when we talk about the second one?
Preference.
I just would like to
Mr. Jacob.
verify that it's okay with the Severson Oil, they're in agreement with this?
Yeah, we are in agreement.
Yeah, we did. I did discuss that with them.
Yeah, we did talk about that. Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah.
And your other issue?
The other issue is with condition number 4. I talked with Mr. Severson about this one. It says petitioners petitioners contact applicable local area emergency responders, personnel, and Gopher Road neighbors to discuss protocol for incident response and any special considerations. This was discussed quite a bit at the Planning Commission meeting because we have a cluster of houses at the dead-end part of Homer Road where we actually, not Homer Road, Gopher Road, excuse me, and the plant itself or the facility itself would be housed at the entrance of Gopher Road at Highway 12. So in essence, the people at the end of Gopher Road have, I don't know what kind of emergency route would be safe. And that was kind of, that turned into this recommendation. And when I asked Mr. Stevenson if they had done this or started this process, he wasn't able to start it yet. He was, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what you were saying seemed to be that once it's approved, you'll start that process. I would rather see that process. I feel very strongly that putting those houses and those families in jeopardy because of an emergency is not good planning. It leaves me without any options really, but I don't want to see this I don't want to see houses at the end of a dirt road with a storage facility at the entrance to that road. Some of you know I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and I lived actually pretty close to the steel mills, which thankfully never had an incident. But I remember vividly when I was probably 10 years old in Whiting, Indiana, which we always thought was so far away that didn't, but there was a storage facility for Standard Oil, and the tanks blew up and people died. And I remember also being 10 years old that a 10-year-old boy lost his leg. So obviously we don't plan for an emergency, but I think we have to plan in case of emergency and hope it never happens. But I would not like to leave those people at the end of the road without an access or an exit.
That's a point well taken, Marie, Commissioner Kavesi. But what I'm thinking is I think condition number 4 covers it to the extent that I don't think a development certificate can be issued without that being submitted. Maybe I'd rely on K for that. Do you have a moment to address that, Kay?
Okay, so it doesn't have to be done before we approve it, but it has to be done before.
It would be done prior to the issuance of development certificate?
Commissioner Pomeroy, that would be correct here. And see, to make sure that they have fulfilled the condition. And so that would be the case here, that contact with the emergency management staff and to put together a preparedness plan for the event of some kind of an emergency there.
And that does include the neighbors, so, yep.
Correct. That's the way it was written anyway. And of course, the commissioners can add information or other requirements as you desire.
Okay, I would just like to make 2 changes to the recommendation then. I know that we talked about that at the Planning Commission there was talk about a certain distance from the facility that would need to be included in this safety plan, not just the Gopher Road neighbors. So I would like to add not just the Gopher, not limit it to the Gopher Road neighbors, but those within that proximity. And I believe it was a half mile, like drawing a circle. I'm looking for the language in the discussion here. Do you recall that, Ms. Qualley?
I'm sorry.
That discussion? Oh, recommend, here it is on page 25 in the discussion with Joshua Murphy, who's a neighbor. He expresses 2 concerns. He says, per the emergency response guidebook, which is used to determine how to respond to hazardous material incidents, the guidebook recommends a minimum evacuation area of 5,600 feet for a hazardous material tank the size of the proposal. So I would say that we should use 5,600 feet as the, including all the neighbors at Gopher Road. I don't know how many feet. He also talks, this is talk for the meeting itself, but, there's a water per minute ratio that needs to be met to fight a fire of that type. So I don't know if we can meet that. So I would like to include the additional neighbors along Highway 12 that are within that 5,600 limit. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Commissioner. Possibly referencing, rather than someone who spoke at the meeting,
Yeah.
could we reference the emergency response
Yes.
guidebook itself?
Yes.
So that we get the most current version
Yes.
and use that as the guidebook?
Let's just say we would
document?
use the emergency guidebook as a
Just a
guideline.
suggestion.
Yeah, good. So that would be that we would use the reference guide as a guideline. The other addition I would like to add is that since we have a new full-time emergency coordinator, that this be maybe number one on his list to join that group. It says applicable to local area emergency responders, personnel, which could and I would say should include Mr. Klinger in his new responsibility, and Gopher Road neighbors using the reference as a guide to discuss protocol for incident response. So I would change that one slightly to make sure that the right people are at the table.
Commissioner Olson.
I just was wondering, Commissioner Kavesi, if that wasn't covered in item number 3, all federal, state, and local regulations regulating propane storage and sales. And you're talking guidelines and you're talking regulations. Unfortunately, I think guidelines are guidelines and regulations are regulations. So you have to abide by one and potentially not the other.
Assuming they use all the guideline, all the regulations in their meeting of item 4, that's fine too, just to make sure that those, that the right people are at the table in terms of all of the neighbors that are impacted.
Commissioner Jacob?
There was quite a bit of time spent on this application at the Planning Commission, and I think all these subjects were kicked around. I feel like we're taking on the job of the Planning Commission at this point. They moved it through, they recommended it with the commission, with the conditions that they recommended. I'm going to make a motion to approve it as the Planning Commission recommended, and as is presented here.
I'll second that on the basis that I believe that the issues that Commissioner Kavesi raised are actually included within items 1 through 7. I think that they're covered there.
We have a motion made by Commissioner Jacob, second by Commissioner Pomeroy, to approve as the 7 conditions from the Planning Commission, with the caveat, and it always goes in the record, our meeting also with the discussion to include those, the intent of those items. I think the intent is in the conditions, but the discussion would be part of the record going forward. Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, that was my purpose, was to make sure that these issues were highlighted in addition to the discussion at the Planning Commission. And that is our job, is to review the recommendations and to either discuss them or approve them or to amend them. So I think highlighting those is enough, as long as that's everybody's clear about those are the intentions of particularly item 4 and 6, condition 4 and 6.
All right, ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then we're going to item
5-4?
5.4.
Page 43.
Yeah, approve Winona County Tax Court Settlement Information, page 43 in our packet. Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, I know we've had some discussion on these items before, and there are also 5 cases pending. This is a really difficult decision, and the term blackmail comes to mind, but I don't know if that applies. Their argument is based on a dark theory of valuation. But my counter question would be, what about their responsibility in our community to pay their fair share of taxes? We started our budget discussion last year with a 6% levy increase just to present a mostly balanced budget, and we negotiated to a 5.5 point levy increase. This amount to pay a refund to these individuals equals more than that 0.5%. So we're hemorrhaging here. My husband teaches business, so I've been kind of steeped in this. But to me, businesses are a good community partner. Yes, they have a commercial purpose and they need to, they advertise, they get their customers in any way they can, they sell. That's all fine and good. In order to do that, they use all the community resources. They use roads and bridges, they use courts, police, and possibly other resources based on whatever their wage scales are and any benefits for their employees. And I believe that should be a fair scale also. But my question is the government subsidizing the housing and the health care and the food and nutrition resources for some of the employees for this business venture? The other issue is the effect on long-standing community businesses, and that's competition, and that is what it is. And just to give one example, I have some figures on parcel number 1. This is how much money they have made out of their initial transaction. They purchased the property for $2.5 million. This was from the Port Authority, and I didn't look up to see if there were any deferred taxes or cleanup for the soil. Those are common additions to purchases for businesses. It's happening at the building at the levee, those issues. So they purchased it for $2.5 million. 6 months later, they sold half of the parcel for $5 million. They did nothing to it. They sold it for $5 million. The following August, which is a little over a year, they sold, I didn't add this up. Let me do some quick math. 300. Sorry about this. I meant to do this on my phone, and now I'm doing it with pencil and paper. They sold a total of $1.6 million worth of parcels 7 months after, well, a little over a year after their initial purchase. And then the following July, they sold $485,000 with a lot. So they are continually making money on this. Yet, in my point of view, they're fighting the taxes that will have to be made up by our moral tax-paying citizens. And that's how I came to the idea that perhaps the term blackmail is in this issue. This is probably the worst example I've seen of a hold your nose and vote item. So that's my rant.
Okay, so
Could we get Steve to come up, maybe talk us through this a little bit?
Mr. Hacken?
I did talk this over with Mr. Hacken.
Cost of doing business in today's assessing world, unfortunately. The property we're at here is, no questions, it's Menards. And they've probably filed suit on every Menards in the entire country.
Yep.
The attorneys take it on contingency basis, and therefore they have little money involved until they get something, and then the attorney gets paid. I don't do these settlements with just off my cuff. I like them about as much as Commissioner Kavesi likes them. However, I think we have a responsibility to the taxpayers in looking at the cost of defending these cases, and how much the county's share is, how much the school and the city's share is. I don't think we probably care a whole lot about what the state share is on these, but we do on the locals. And frankly, sometimes the cost of these things is just exorbitantly more than what coming up with a settlement is. That's, and everyone's going to be different. And I know Mr. Fritz and I had talked a couple weeks ago, and I'm real nervous to talk about our strategies we use when we negotiate these, because we have other properties out there and everyone's going to be unique. So we really don't like to get us, but it's certainly our hired counsel and the county attorney and I have talked about what are some of our options on these things, and sometimes they are what they are.
Commissioner Olson?
So when our local press reports on this in the paper, they can put a whole new meaning on save big money, right?
Sure.
We don't want to help them in any way.
I'm sorry, I take a little different attitude. I don't like the tax system the way it is, but we deal with the tax system. And we talk about this whole concept of commercial taxing at the AMC board level, because every county is faced with this. And we're fortunate to have big business here doing, you got to look at how many dollars they bring into the economy and what they pay in wages and benefits and products. So we are beneficial. Where there's a lot of small town America that they're losing their small town, businesses. And they are really, they're at a different level, but they're commercial property, the little mom and pop grocery stores and hardware stores and such are really facing a huge tax burden too. So it's not criminal to make money, but they're doing their business. They're trying to protect what they earn, and I don't think they're being totally out of line with, they pay a lot of taxes. You can't just look at property taxes. You have to look at the whole picture of taxes that any business is expected to pay in the American economy. So again, I don't think we need to portray them as the evil people. They do a lot of good for the community. And I know if you go to the board, and I don't know the specific businesses, but I know a lot of businesses here in Winona give back to the community. There's dollars that are really given, in donations for projects and things like that. So again, I take a little different. I don't like the property tax system, but that's the system we're forced to work with. Commissioner Kavesi.
I didn't want to picture them as evil or criminal. It's certainly not criminal. The word I used was moral and fair. And I don't feel it's fair to put that extra more than 0.5% back on our moral tax-paying citizens, our farmers, all of the people we advocate for. Obviously, they're in it to make money. Obviously, they've made money. We would have to do a real investigation to figure out if it makes a balance with any contributions to the community. This actually, my husband teaches courses where they have cases to study with senior level business students, and this would make an excellent case because of the moral implications of avoiding or evading taxes. So it may turn up someday as a discussion.
Commissioner Pomeroy.
I just wanted to maybe better understand a little bit what's happening. I've read about the dark theory, which basically assumes that the business is vacant and sitting there and depreciating. But how does that correlate to replacement cost and such? Or is that thrown out of the equation, replacement cost?
Well, I think in real appraisal, we're going to look at 3 different methods. We're going to look at what they cost to build, less depreciation. We're going to look at what they sell for, and we're going to look at what they rent for, and you capitalize it. That's the 3 methods you can arrive at value on a property.
Okay.
The dark store method ignores the cost approach and ignores the income approach and only looks at the sales approach. And what they're tending to do is find properties that are distressed. They're overbuilt. They're in the wrong location. They've outlived their usefulness. That tends to be what they want to use because good stores that are making money don't sell. And so, that seems to be the problem. Now, I can tell you guys that we settled at a much higher number than what their appraisal came in at. They provided us with an appraisal of the property that was considerably less than what we settled this at.
But that's based upon their theory as
That's
well.
their theory. So,
Right.
you know, and
So this is a compromise.
that's what settlements tend to be. And, you know, it's, you know, I mean, I think it's that, and I think it's, you know, frankly, how much risk do we want to put the county at trying to go to court on one of these? I can tell you the cost to go to court against the Menards exceeds 6 figures. And the county is responsible for all of those costs. They're not spread back to anybody else. We have to do that. So certainly, I think I've been here a long time, and you know, I think I always try to make sure we make decisions that are, you know, that we feel are in the county's best interest, and you know, that's what we're trying to do. We've got other properties, as I told Commissioner Konveski, that we think we're absolutely right on, and we have no intentions of settling at this point with them. Maybe down the line, my lawyer says, you know, Steve, you can't fight them for any more than this. And, you know, that's part of the deal on these things. And, you know, it's you know, and I mean, you just got to go on the internet. It's not, what I want you to really understand, it's not just here. Hennepin County has over 2,000 petitions a year they deal with. You know, we had 8 last year, you know, and Martin County, which is a third of our size, has more than we have. So it's kind of just the way the world has changed. And, you know, we've got to look at them, and we have to make a decision based on what we think's in our best interests. And that's what I tried to do with this.
My last question would be, the settlements that you've put forth here, are those court-approved settlements?
No, what happens is, once you approve them, because the agreements we've made with the other parties have been tentative upon you guys approving them. And at that point, then their side draws up stipulation papers, and they go in their county signs them, they sign them, and then the tax court approves them.
Okay. Thank you. I think I understand it a little better.
And we asked for this change, that these come to the county board so that we knew what was going on.
Yeah, these have always previously been just settled by the attorney.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Commissioner Konveski.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the reasoning behind this, and I actually stand with our assessor on this, although it's very unpalatable. I really just wanted to raise those issues and make them, you know, give the public some ideas of some of the background on some of this.
One more question for Steve. What are you seeing elsewhere outside Winona County? Menards must be gaining traction in different locations.
One of the things that I used to assist me to come up with a value was I had contacted every county in the state that had a Menards, and I asked them, have you settled with them? And if you have, how much? And so I've got a spreadsheet in my office that has confidential data on it, but that talks about what they've all been settled at and everything else. And so that's one of the tools that I use to see where we could, you know, reasonably end up on this.
Yeah, I don't have any. That's a lot of homework. Well done. Thanks for doing that. I don't have any problems supporting this motion the way it's presented. Government has to be challenged, and I guess I would have to say I almost feel it's necessary to apologize. To imply the word moral anywhere assumes that somebody must not be moral. I don't think there's anything but good intentions and people defending their God-given rights, and I think this is all fair.
I'd move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Pomeroy, seconded by Commissioner Jacob to approve the Winona County Tax Court settlement. Any further discussion? I think we just need to say thank you to these businesses for being here, because without them we would have a bigger hole. You look at across the country, just in our down the river, La Crosse, Herberger's is a big box store that's closing because they can't compete. The big thing, I think, is if we could collect the appropriate money for all the internet sales. Start ordering your 2x4s online and see if you have to pay tax, and then of course, they'll drop them right at your house and all this stuff. But the climate is changing considerably in our retail and our purchasing practices and in our tax structure. So that's something I know Steve is very well aware of. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, we are to 6.1. The proclaim May 16th, 2018 as Winona County Law Enforcement Memorial Day. Page 88. So we need a motion.
I would move to adopt the resolution
Second.
proclaiming Winona County Law Enforcement Memorial Day on the 16th of May.
Motion made by Commissioner Pomeroy, second by Commissioner Jacob to adopt the Law Enforcement Memorial Day as May 16th, and the resolution reads as follows. Whereas the 16th of May 2018 is designated as Winona County Law Enforcement Memorial Day and is set aside as a day to honor all fallen law enforcement officers. The well-being of all citizens of Winona County and the United States is preserved and enhanced as a direct result of the vigilance and dedication of law enforcement personnel. More than 700,000 men and women at great risk to their personal safety presently serve their fellow citizens as guardians of peace. More than 135 peace officers across the nation were killed in the line of duty during 2017. All Winona County area law enforcement agencies use this day to honor our fallen fellow officers who have made the supreme sacrifice for citizens of Winona County and the city of Winona. This day also serves as a reminder of dangers faced currently serving law enforcement officers to their day-to-day activities. Our officers do not serve in a vacuum, but are assisted in many ways by the citizens of Winona and Winona County. Now, therefore, Commissioner Marcia Ward, do hereby call upon all citizens of Winona County to join area law enforcement agencies in honoring our fallen officers on Winona County Law Enforcement Memorial Day, adopted this 8th day of May 2018. And Sheriff, do we have a ceremony scheduled? Yes. And that will be at, is it noon?
Noon. It says noon in the background notes
Yes,
here.
it's noon here, but
On
it
the
is
16th.
I think it's always been noon.
12:30.
Okay.
So there is a ceremony at 12:30 between the courthouse and the by the flagpole. Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, I can't support this strongly enough. Day after day, that's somebody's job, and I appreciate it immensely. I do have one change. The recommendation on page 88 says proclaim May 17th as Winona County Law Enforcement Day, but the rest of this all shows May 16th. So did we have
There
a
was an amended.
amendment? Okay, sorry. I just wanted to make sure we were proclaiming the right day.
Yes. Okay. All right.
I move that we adopt this.
We already have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we already did.
We don't
So
vote it.
we're good to go on that.
Okay.
All right. 6.2, discuss request to hire a new full-time deputy sheriff. Page 90 in our.
Again, good morning.
Good morning, Sheriff. Chief Deputy.
So we've brought this back to the board for your request that in order to have further discussion, we needed to bring it back. In the meantime, Chief Deputy Mueller and I did meet with the owner, CEO of Premier Security, Dan Walker, and asked him to come today. He is here. I think you already know my position, so I'm not going to rehash all that, but I would ask Mr. Walker to come up and address the board and give a little background on himself and his Premier Security business, and then answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning. As Sheriff Ganrud said, I'm Dan Walker. I'm President and CEO of Premier Security. We've been in business since 1996. Since 1996, we've grown immensely. We have over 120 employees company-wide. Southeast Minnesota, Mankato area, Minneapolis. We provide security to many different facilities throughout the area. Some are governmental in nature, some are private businesses, some are hospitals. We have also provided security to International Airport. We're one of the very few in the Midwest that provide an armed presence in an international airport and work alongside the Transportation Security Administration in that facility. So I'm proud of my employees. I'm proud of what we do. Probably 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more, we entered into a contract to provide security services at the Winona County Courthouse, and we've been doing that since. We had a great run with John Grable and Chad Reddy. They were here for an extended period of time. And as the system we work within, there's change that occurs. Now, the other pride that I put to this is that probably 90% of the people that have worked the courthouse have went on to law enforcement positions. And that's what they want to do. And we don't want to hold employees back to that. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have and maybe kind of explain some of the issues that I was only privy to in reading the newspaper.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Walker? Mr. Jacob?
So the services that our elected official is asking to have provided, are those also services that you can provide?
We provide services from the very basic, what we call a level 1, which is a security officer gate guard. We also can provide services up to a level 5, which are fully armed services trained to a law enforcement standard. And so we can provide various levels of security as needed and as required by the contract.
Could I ask what level we're at here in Winona?
Sure. So generally it's a level 3 or 4. It's an armed position. As required by the contract, all security officers assigned to the duty under this agreement shall be trained to the State of Minnesota Board of Private Detective and Protective Agent Services standards and training. We're licensed through the State of Minnesota and that particular board to provide the services that we do. We have knowledge of basic life support techniques, first aid, CPR, and those issues. Knowledge of current law enforcement principles. Training is based around law enforcement principles. Procedures, techniques, and equipment shall be skilled in the use of firearms. So yes, we do provide training in the use of firearms up to the state standard, and like say for level 5, for instance, would be commonly referred to as a plainclothes agent that works for high net worth individuals or visiting royalty that provide a plainclothes, highly trained standard agent to those types of individuals that require it. So,
Commissioner Jacob?
So it sounds like you can provide the service that Winona County could be short in. Could you provide it at any level from, a part-time to a full-time position?
Any of our contracts are based upon part-time or full-time, depending on contract requirements.
Just discussion with the board, I guess that feels like kind of a good stepping stone to seeing what our needs are there. I mean, if we hired a part-time premier, once we hire an additional county employee, we're bound by the union again. 12 months goes by, our hands are kind of tied with what we can and can't do with unions.
Commissioner Kavesi?
Yeah, I had a question about some of the background information that we've been provided. We had additional material, which I assume was from Administrator Fritz. There's a package of material and the pages weren't numbered, so I numbered them. This is page 4, which is the Minnesota Counties Intergovernmental Trust correspondence. There's reference to a letter. Attorney Rick Hodgson, this is in the first paragraph, on behalf of the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, has recently provided guidance to another county on this issue, which may be of value as you consider this matter. And it says the letter is attached, and I was not able to find it. I don't know, there's 11 pages of attachments here, but
There was
6 pages are the training requirements, 1 page is the statute, 1 page is Attorney Nuttall, and 2 pages are background.
Yeah, it should have been included in there if it wasn't. But the reference is part of that issue that I recommended, or I suggested that regardless of where the county board goes on hiring a new deputy or looking at options through Premier, that they ask the county attorney or possibly the attorney general, depending on how you want to approach it, for a definitive answer to the armed security guard question in the courthouse. There's some confusion based on some of the correspondence that we've had as to, and I think even at a previous meeting, County Attorney Sonneman mentioned that she had some questions, and so that's a kind of a separate issue that's come up because of the discussion. It's really not the discussion of whether we have a new deputy or not. It's really whether, if we're going to, regardless of what path we go down, it'd be good to get that settled. And that's really what that other attachment was referencing. There's some confusion depending on who you talk to as to whether armed security was appropriate in the courthouse or not, armed private security.
So the letter has reference to hiring private security.
It talks about the Sheriff's Association position on private security and kind of in general, and kind of says his conclusion, I think, was that he doesn't necessarily agree with it. Is that fair, Sheriff?
That's fair. Rich Hodgson, again, is the Minnesota Sheriff's Association legal counsel, and he's been there doing that for, 25 or 30 years. He's also a prosecuting attorney up in the cities.
Washington County.
So he has a lot of background. So the question was posed to him, and he gave us a written response. And when we got that was when County Attorney Sonneman was laid up last year, and she had appointed Assistant County Attorney Stephanie Nuttall to review things in her absence. And I think that's what you have a copy of. So there's a difference of opinion on whether or not security guards are county employees, and security guards can make arrests, and security guards have the authority to bear arms in the court.
Yeah, there's some legal questions as to whether we have an agency agreement with the Premier Security and how that factors into it, and so forth. And this was brought up because Houston County was looking at going to the same situation or a similar situation that we have, and using private security. And so that discussion going back and forth, if you look at the MCIT letter that I sent you, that's our insurance company basically saying, well, you're covered as long as it's legal to have the armed security there, to make it a pretty, kind of simple statement. So we just need reassurance from our legal authorities that it is legal, that our coverage is the risk is managed. It's then covered under MCIT, or at least would be the advice would be that it would be covered. That's really a separate issue to the issue of what we're talking about here, but it does need to get cleaned up, or at least addressed.
Okay. Attorney Sonneman.
Well, and if I can just jump in, this did come up when I was on medical leave, and as we already discussed at the previous meeting where you asked for Premier Security to come in, the email that Ms. Nuttall wrote in response to this question of, do security guards, are they authorized to carry weapons, and so I did not review that. I did not, that was something that came out of my office while I was gone. This is a pretty complex issue, actually, and so I appreciate Administrator Fritz's suggestion in his letter to the board in previewing this issue that an opinion be issued by me. I'd like to review this. MCIT is involved. And as usual, we always consult with MCIT on particularly serious issues involving what is really a statutory issue, because the sheriff, unlike even the gentleman from Premier, stated that they provide services for our work with TSA at Minneapolis International, I'm assuming, right? Is that correct?
We have another international airport. It's called Rochester.
Okay.
And that's where we do it.
Okay. But as I said before, in our previous discussion of this, the courthouse is a unique building, and by statute, the sheriff is required to provide security in that building, and so that puts a little different kind of, casts a different picture on the statutory under 62684, which says by itself that somebody acting as an agent of a government entity is not allowed to be armed unless they also comply with certain provisions of another part of the statute, which is really to be a licensed peace officer. But again, this is all very complex, and I would like the opportunity to review this. I don't think there's ever been a question about whether or not Premier Security or any security agency could be providing services in the courthouse. It's a matter of what can they provide as services. And I have been on record in the last meeting in terms of supporting the sheriff's request for a full-time deputy, because that goes along with his responsibility of providing security at the courthouse. But I do want the opportunity to review what Administrator Fritz has articulated in his letter to you, as well as it really is, it is kind of related to the issue of what kind of services can any private security agency provide in the courthouse. And again, it's different than, Premier Security provides services to this building, also to community services. Those are different buildings. There's not a statutory requirement that the sheriff provides security to those buildings. And so it has a different cast on it as far as what a private security agency can and can't do. So,
Commissioner Jacob.
Do we know, are there any other, of the 87 counties, are there any other counties that are using private security, armed private security? It would seem that would be a good...
I don't know of any.
Do you know what there's not?
I would believe that both Ramsey and Hennepin have private security in some form at their courthouses, but I can't tell you what is.
I think that would be a good measure for us.
Didn't Houston County enter into an agreement with them? No? Okay.
I know they were discussing.
Yeah, okay, I didn't know if it went forward.
Commissioner Pomeroy.
Well, two items. One is, are you asking us to defer until you're able to render an opinion?
well, I think, in one ways it is a separate issue, but that question still has to be answered, because I think, or the question about use of private security and what they can or can't do in the courthouse, and I'm going to make that very clear, it's just in the courthouse, is intertwined with that. So it's, I do believe that it's important to have a dedicated deputy to provide security and supervise the private security officers, but we still have to answer the question of what can and what cannot those private security officers do in the courthouse.
So was that a yes or was that a no?
That's a good attorney answer, right?
Lawyerly, yes. Printed on gray paper.
The word I heard there was it would be a supervisory position, which would be a supervisor in the union.
Is that correct?
It's not an entry level.
This whole team?
I'm not saying it's a supervisor, it's up to the sheriff, really.
Right, but it wasn't, in the last discussion we had at the county board meeting, it was said that it wasn't a supervisor.
I'm not asking for a supervisor. This may be a person that's appointed like we have right now. We have two people on the night shift that are the lead deputies, and they get lead deputy pay, which I think is $1.75 an hour. that they get when they are actually leading other deputies.
The second issue that I had was, and correct me if I'm wrong on some of this, I'm just trying to get some questions answered. The court administrator's office, they're all state employees, is that right?
Yes.
The probation department, we purchase services from the state, even though they're hired locally, correct?
There's a mix in the probation department. There are still some employees, I believe, and Maureen probably can answer that, that are county employees, and that's from the old switch. So
The judges, they're elected locally or appointed by the governor, but they're also state employees,
they're
is that
also
correct?
state employees, yes.
I guess it leads to the natural question, why doesn't the state share in the security costs? I mean, really, if you do think about it, while there are some local influences in there for sure, but it's actually more like an arm of the state. Is that incorrect?
No.
We also pay for the building and the maintenance and housing them and.
It's the, as I told the sixth graders at Law Day, it's part of the judicial branch, but we're part of the executive branch, meaning my office, the sheriff's department. And so we share the building, but it is the county's building. And it originally was a county district courthouse. I mean, it's a county, it started out as a county, there was the merger into the state. Even the the court administrator was a county employee. And then the state took over many functions. But you're right, there's, they use a considerable part of the building. In fact, our office, the county attorney's office, I think is the only county office left in the courthouse. And that was at the move of, moving certain offices out and into county office building now.
I just think it raises the natural question as,
Sharing the
so much
cost.
of it is a state function that, maybe they should be participating in some of those costs.
It's one of the
That's-
great unfunded mandates.
Right, and that's pretty much all I'll have to say on that.
Yeah.
Mr. Fritz, you had something to add?
Yeah, I was going to just the caveat that I had on the supervisor issue is that, and I advise the board of this, that it might be difficult to put a deputy in a lead position and have it not be called a supervisor by the union. Typically, that would, if it looks like a duck, and so we do have concerns that if it was crafted that way, it may end up being evolving or being pressured into making it a supervisor if that person is in fact supervising people, even if it's just guiding or monitoring or that kind of thing. So.
Commissioner Olson.
Just a question, and maybe Dan, you can help me too. Do your employees receive benefits? Vacation?
Some positions require that, some don't. We like to use the term, it's more in the pay rate, and some of our employees appreciate that more than a full benefit package. And at what we currently charge Winona County, full benefit package would not be available.
Okay, and then, so let's say one of your employees has called in sick. You didn't send in a replacement?
Correct. We have that in place, and that's been used multiple times.
Okay, now I got a question for Ron. Ron, when you say a full-time deputy, and I know because I'm a union member for several years. Full-time deputy has sick time, vacation, and I support benefits. I really do, but it's not really a full-time position. What is your plan for when this person is on leave to fill this void?
I guess it kind of depends on the day. If we know that there's a high-profile case going on, we would probably take, if we have 3 deputies working the day shift, which right now we don't have because we're a person short and a person on sick leave. But my thing is, if we had 3 deputies, I could try to backfill if we had a high-profile case. If we don't have anything that we know is, and I guess high-profile case usually is a request from the county attorney, court administration, or the judges to provide extra security. To get to your point, some days we would just be without that person.
Yeah, a lot of water.
Commissioner Olson, if I can follow up. You talk about this doesn't completely alleviate the concerns of the sheriff's office. What else you got out there that you're going to come back with, next month? How would you obtain the greatest amount of security that's required under your statute? What would we be looking at?
If I could get.
Well, it says here it doesn't.
The sky's the limit.
Yeah, you say it doesn't completely alleviate. What other concerns do you have?
This is the concern, is courthouse security. But if I could get what I felt we completely needed and money wasn't an issue, I'd be asking for all deputies over at the courthouse. And we would ask for premier security to be eliminated from the courthouse. But I understand that the county can't afford that. So I'm not asking to lose the 2 premier security guards. I'm asking to have a deputy over there. So again, he's right there in the building most of the time, able to respond to emergencies as they come up, be there to mitigate them, and hopefully be there to eliminate a lot of them because of his presence. That's why we wear uniforms. That's why we wear a badge on our chest so people see us, and that's enough to keep most people calm down and not do the bad choices that people tend to make.
Okay.
So again, if I had what I really wanted, I'd be standing here asking you for 3 full-time deputies over there at least. But I'm not doing that.
Okay. In a lot of things, we use this, quote, comparable counties, wages and things like that. Have we done any comparison with our comparable counties as to how they staff? I guess I don't see us as a high crime, and we don't have a lot of high profile cases and such, which is a good thing. So, I mean, we don't know what our comparable counties are doing as far as staffing numbers and days in court, and we have nothing to compare it to. That we're to say that we're under securing it or over securing it or anything like that. So I'm just saying, obviously we probably haven't done that kind of research because we don't know.
But I would just like to point out one thing, and that's that we have a magnetometer, a new one now, actually 2, and we're one of the few places I know of, maybe the only place I can think of, that don't do screening at the front door on a regular basis. Olmsted County, whenever you go there, they have full-time deputies manning their screening area. You go to Houston County, you go to Wabasha County, they have either an investigator or a designated deputy that provides courthouse security. And if in Houston County, if that deputy is busy, it's the sheriff who's standing in.
Okay.
So I don't know where he finds the time to do that, but I know he's told me many times he's busy with courthouse security.
Okay. And then in your verbiage here, it says backfilling with deputies has created overtime, which could be avoided by hiring full-time deputy. So do we know how much overtime we've paid that relates directly to the courthouse situation?
In the first packet that we got on the first go-around, there was an email that was included by Sergeant Fruth that laid out whatever the date was that would have had in that email as to what it's the year-to-date cost, at least anyway.
Okay, I apologize then. I have to go back in that last packet. And then one thing, I guess, that when Attorney Sonoman's looking at this, we talk about liability. Well, Mr. Apologize. Pardon me? Walker. I'm sorry. I wanted to say Waters and Walker. Mr. Walker's company also has liability insurance. So in a way, I see when you have a private entity, you've got liability coverage there. Of course, Winona County has liability coverage. So it's almost a plus to have the private security because he's covering some of our liability too. So I mean, I don't want to diminish the capability of a private entity to service what we need and how we can move forward.
Can I make just one point real quick? It's maybe belaboring it since we spoke a little bit at the last meeting, but just as a comparison to the best that I've given you when we're speaking of these courthouse positions. I know we keep calling them courthouse security positions, but I think the sheriff's office views those positions on an equivalency to a deputy driving around in a squad car type of position. When I say that, It's because they're doing, in this essence, the exact same functions as those deputies. They're dealing with hostile people. They're making arrests. Matter of fact, if you actually run the numbers for the year, which I wish I would have done before I walked in here, I would say the courthouse security folks are probably on the high end of making the most arrests actually in the county, just by chance of them always taking people into custody from court, taking people into custody from probation, which is a daily, multiple time occurrence that it happens anyway. So in drawing a comparison of saying, for any of the reasons, and although Mr. Walker, like he just described his premier security training and everything else that they have, I would be in agreement with that. But for all of the reasons that we would say that wouldn't be a wise thing to put a armed premier security person in a squad car and have them go patrol around and we send the deputies home today, it might save money on that, I would grant that. But for any of the reasons that would be a bad idea, a bad practice idea to do that, in essence, that's the way I foresee the courthouse security positions. And when you mentioned, does it alleviate the problems for that? I don't think it does by having court security still there, but we need them still there because we need the bodies to actually fulfill the duties over there, and trying to mitigate some of those reasons, just like if we sent premier security out in a squad car to drive around and answer calls and do any of those things. Having a deputy over there, I think, would assist in mitigating some of those problems, although not eliminating, but once again, with the idea of trying to be fiscally, I guess, as you want to say, somewhat responsible, and not coming over and saying, if you want this, in our position at least, this potential problem totally eliminated, then we would want 4 licensed officers instead just coming over and asking for 1.
Commissioner Jacob.
Off the cuff there, is that a possibility to put a premier security in a squad and take one of your deputies and put them in the courthouse?
For all of the reasons.
That satisfies the statute, right?
I'd have to research that, but I would say no, it would not, because there has to be a licensed peace officer enforcing the laws for the sheriff's department.
I thought you were already.
For all of the reasons, I think that would potentially be a bad idea. It's the same logic that I use of saying it's the same reasons that it's potentially a bad idea at the courthouse.
A couple other questions still.
Okay.
The Mary Leahy letter, did we have that in our packet, or did that just come today?
It just came today.
Was that available to the public?
It can be. She literally got it done this morning.
Okay.
Certainly make it available to the public.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to really review that. That should have been in our packet.
Yeah, I got to work this morning. I found it in my mailbox.
Something else?
No, go ahead.
Okay, Commissioner Kavesi.
Thank you. I had a couple questions. I have questions on the position of the lead deputy. Do we categorize that by a certain number of employees that have that capacity? I realize you said when they act as a lead deputy, they have a pay raise, which means they don't always. So what are the different responsibilities can you give us a number of how many people have that additional responsibility as lead deputy?
We have basically 2 shifts on the night shift, and
there's a lead deputy.
So there's a lead deputy on the night shift.
Okay.
And then we have 1 during the day that leads the investigators.
And it's your intention to make this new position a lead deputy level? Is that?
That's something that I guess you'd say I appoint. I did take applications and interview for that on the night shift and for the day shift. And in this case, yes, I believe I have the authority to delegate somebody to be the lead.
Okay. Have any current lead deputy positions been challenged by the union to be considered as supervisory level positions?
Well, I know that Ms. Holte is talking to the union about language.
So no current lead deputies have been challenged as perhaps they should be considered supervisory, unless it's coming up.
It'd be if there's someone under them.
Well, the other thing is there additional training and experience to be considered as a lead deputy? You know, is there additional
There's
qualifications?
additional experience that the people have, I guess, to answer your question best as to whether it's been challenged or not. Currently, the county's going through actually establishing a lead deputy job classification position anyway that addresses the specific duties that that person would have, at least in my opinion, and Solti would be able to answer it better than me, how I foresee or the sheriff foresees the courthouse deputy would be falling under that job classification that's currently being worked on with those duties.
That's going to be clarified in negotiations, the difference between a lead deputy and a supervisory position, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And laying out the specific duties that that lead deputy person would have.
Right. Okay, so, you know, to me it would be important to know, I guess, some of the duties or whatever as soon as that's defined. The other issue is we have the training standards for the security level positions, the private positions. The training standards for a peace officer or a police officer, that you cover the same topics, probably plus other topics, but would it be fair to say you'd spend more hours or more time on those topics of de-escalation and recognition of mental health and those kinds of topics, as well as training with firearms and all that?
Yes, we have firearms qualifications at least twice a year. One of them has to be low light and cold weather or inclement weather, I guess. We also have, we call it PPCT or defensive tactics. That's a full day class.
Okay, because here it's included in 6 hours.
So
Yeah.
some of the things that Mr. Walker is pointing out to us are the same things we train in. I would say we train more. More hours are required, and in order to keep our, I guess I was a little confused by one thing Mr. Walker brought up. Each deputy is a licensed deputy through the Minnesota Post Board. I think the way that you said it, your firm is licensed.
That's what I heard, yeah. Does that mean each individual security officer that you hire is also licensed?
In Minnesota, we don't require a license for each individual, as great as that would be. The biggest issue that is a prohibitor to that is the state of Minnesota devoting enough money to start up a system where individuals would be licensed. I would prefer that, but we've worked with our board, myself, for the last 20 years to try to figure that out, but unfortunately we are not funded to do that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The other thing, I'm not totally familiar with the qualifications of the regular deputy hires. Is that a 2-year college training course or more? Or
You have to have a minimum of 2 years.
Okay.
And then you have 4 years.
Yes.
And then you have to go to you have to pass the police
academy.
officer's license. And then you have to go to the skills course, which is another quarter of classes, and pass that. Then when you get your certification at that point, you don't get your license until you actually get hired by a department. Before you can get hired, you have to pass a psychological test. You have to pass a physical agility test. You have to pass a physical, the drug screening, and you have to go through all that. And I think a big one is the psychological.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Commissioner Olson?
You know, I have enough questions, more questions after today's discussion and Commissioner Ward had mentioned, you know, what are other counties doing at the courthouse? How do we compare? Attorney Sonneman has mentioned having to do some research. Sheriff Ganrud, you mentioned comparing us to some other counties, and you made some inferences, which I know that in one case is simply not true. And I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just telling you from my experience, from what you presented today, there's no magnetometer that is manned at Houston County Courthouse.
I don't think I said that. I said Sheriff Inglet provides courthouse security himself.
But, yeah, okay, maybe I misunderstood.
Maybe I miss,
Yeah, you said the sheriff manned it when it wasn't manned by.
okay, I thought, if I said that, that is a mistake, and I apologize.
I just know, because
Yeah.
I
What I'm saying is he sits in the courtroom and provides courtroom security
Correct.
himself.
Okay.
They provide the security.
I just have more questions than I guess than we have answers today, and I hate to say table it again, but how long can you table something until we have answers?
Yeah, indefinitely.
I would be tempted to say that I would support having another premier security personnel on staff at the courthouse to fulfill that void that we are speaking of until such time as we can answer these other questions. But even that is not. I can't support even asking that without answering some other questions if it's even legal.
So would that be a motion to table?
I would make
answers?
a motion to table until we have some more definitive answers, and I no disrespect to anybody. I can't make a decision today.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion to table the request to hire a new full-time deputy sheriff. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay.
Could I ask a question? There's, I think each of you have questions that you'd like answered.
So we should direct those to you.
Well, that was going to be my request is tell us what you want us to research. Tell us what you're interested in knowing the answers to. And Chief Deputy Mueller and I will work on getting you the answers as quick as we can.
Okay. So, Ms. Holte.
May I ask that Mr. Fritz and I are CC'd on those, just because we have to also make sure all of that information is clean.
Okay. So any questions, direct to Sheriff Ganrud and CC Mr. Fritz and Ms. Holte.
I would ask that Premier be included in the loop too. I mean, they might have responses to some of those questions on what their capacity and capabilities are.
Is your email in here, Mr. Walker? Or you can provide you can provide it to Mr. Fritz, and then we can have that.
Would our county attorney also like to be CC'd on those questions?
I would, and I would also like to know if you want me to go ahead and prepare an opinion on the issues that have arisen on this, particularly the matter of what a private security company can and can't do in the courthouse.
Does that need to be a motion?
Not necessarily, just a direction.
I would like that, especially since it's in the MCIT advice.
Can you query the Supreme Court justice to say what are they going to contribute to the courthouse security in moving forward? Because it's their employees that we're protecting. I mean, I'm seriously, the legislature gave us a small grant, the state of Minnesota, peanuts. What was it, a couple years ago, to buy some equipment?
$12,000 for the magnometer.
Yeah, I mean, it was peanuts. And for as many state employees that we're, quote, protecting, I have a question. So Judge Leahy seems a little nervous. I mean, I think she wrote this quickly and such. Are judges provided any kind of self-defense or protective training? I mean, she mentions walking out late at night. I mean, do they go through any kind of, hand-to-hand combat training?
Well, thanks to the sheriff's department, we've had active shooter training, and that's on a regular basis, and the judges are included in that. So
that's good, because I think we do have to take some personal responsibility in our safety.
They do. I think everybady's frustrated by the lack of
are they
support
trained?
from budgets.
I want to see their training record. If they're trained.
I think Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has a program for our judges if they want to follow her training.
It's kind of a tough. Let's see. Somebody had their light on over here.
Yeah.
Commissioner Jacob.
So I understand that we're asking for your opinion as county attorney, and you've kind of already stated what your position is in supporting the sheriff, and your position already differs from one of your assistant attorneys. This is not a question for you, what is our flexibility with asking for more than just one opinion? Because I'm going to guess that I think I know what Attorney Sonoman's opinion is going to be, and I think there's going to be other opinions that probably are just as valid.
Can I speak to that? Again, I am.
NCIT. We do have the NCIT, who is a legal.
Well,
Did
they,
that come from
no,
Jennifer Wolf?
no, they won't provide us an opinion on that.
Okay.
You could ask the Attorney General, but I think Karin should speak to it. I mean, I understand what you're going for, but it's,
Yeah, I think we should get your opinion, but I'm just not sure that that's the only opinion that matters.
yeah, well, I mean,
I first of all, again, I'm the elected county attorney. The opinion that was issued by my office was not issued by me. That was when I was on medical leave, and unfortunately, I did not have an opportunity to review it. And it's actually a much more complicated question than what was, I think, responded to. As an official of this county, and having gone through training, security training myself, as well as reading the National Institute of Corrections report on the lack of, or on what we need to do, and this is kind of to your question, Chair Ward, about what else does the sheriff want. There's a whole report that was done on the security at the courthouse and what we need really to beef that up, and we've done many things for getting the new magnometer, putting shades on the courthouse windows, things that are inexpensive. So I take the position of, yes, a full-time deputy should be assigned to the courthouse. We just toured the Goodhue County Courthouse and the Goodhue County Jail as part of the Jail Advisory Study Committee, and they have a magnometer that you go into the courthouse. It is staffed by deputies, and so I think we're trying to, as a group here, from the courthouse and the whole security issue, public safety, the safety of people working in the courthouse. It's important to keep moving toward a more ideal situation. So I take kind of issue when you say, well, we want another opinion. You can't go shopping for opinions until you get the one that you want. I make my opinions based on the law and how I interpret that law, and also based on the facts that are present. So, and one of those facts is that we have a report that says our courthouse needs more security. And I like to always joke about it, but it's kind of, we don't live in Mayberry anymore. I love Andy Griffith, but we really have to do a better job of beefing up our security in the courthouse, as well as also at the community services building. And that's where people get into arguments and get escalated. I'm sure Ms. Johnson can speak to that. I see her in the back there. Where people are angry about things. So it's a blessing that nothing has seriously happened. There have been incidents, but because of the response, the rapid response of our sheriff's department and our police department, those situations have been addressed, and safely too. So I guess that's my soapbox stand of why I think it's really important to have a deputy in the courthouse.
Okay, I've got, just so you know, I've got Mr. Fritz, Commissioner Olson, and Commissioner Kavesi. So, Mr. Fritz.
yeah, I think a lot of that I agree with, and I understand the need for security, the position taking on that, but as far as the way I'm looking at this and the way I understand Commissioner Jacobs' question is about a legal opinion of whether or not private armed security is legal or appropriate. It's not about more security or less security that we're asking for the opinion. That's a how we would get there. So, if it is that you can use armed security, then the board has options to use armed security. If it's that you can't use armed security, then obviously that limits their ability to deal with security. It doesn't change the discussion about how much security can be provided. So I'm a little concerned that we probably, they do have options. The problems with those options, the concerning part of those options is it takes more time, because if you try to, ask the Attorney General for an opinion, you may get one, you may not. If you try to hire someone outside that has expertise in this area, you have to find someone like that, and I don't know if that's a possibility or not. And then you have the situation that the county attorney's position could end up being different than that attorney's position, and then you puts the board in another situation. So it's a difficult question, but I do think the board has options.
And everybody realized we far exceeded our Robert's Rules of Order on a table. So, but,
Yeah.
Commissioner Olson.
And Karen, this would just be in response to what you had just said. Earlier in the meeting, you said you needed to research this a little bit to form an opinion, but then you said your opinion is we needed a licensed deputy. And I think, particularly, I would like to know if, I understand that's your opinion, but I wanted a little bit more research to say, can we use armed guards? I think we need to know that. Is that legal? Is that going to be recognized under MCIT? Is that recognized legal option and a preferred option? I think right now you're saying we'd prefer licensed deputy, but can we legally put? And you mentioned before you need to research a little bit more, but now you've said, well, this is your opinion.
Well, I
so
think,
we want a definitive opinion.
well, and I want to give you a definitive opinion on what the question is, and so I'm hearing different questions, but I think what the question I'm hearing that you want an opinion on is what services can a private security firm, any private security firm, not just Premier, provide in the courthouse? Because that's separate really from do we need a deputy?
Yeah, that's the question I want answered along with, is it taking place in other counties in Minnesota?
Okay, Commissioner, is that it?
Yep.
Commissioner Kavesi.
I just had a question. Is courthouse security part of today's inspection?
No.
Okay, although it's
It's
one
the
of
jail.
it's one of the sheriff's duties. So
It's not-
they're not
it's not the
reviewing the
sheriff
duties,
being
they're
inspected,
reviewing
it's
the
the
jail.
jail.
Okay,
Right.
all right. Too bad.
Okay, it is tabled.
Yes.
Discussion end. Thank you very much.
Could I say just, well, one thing?
I'll allow you one thing.
Thank you. We're talking about employees and the people that work in the courthouse and providing them with security. There's a lot of the general public in there, day in and out, day out. We're not just providing security to the judges or the county attorney or whoever works there. The general public comes and goes all the time, and we don't always know why they're there. And that's why it's important to man the magnetometer, because we don't know if somebody's mad all the time. If they have court, they might not be happy. If they're going through a marriage dissolution, they're probably not happy. If they're there for some other reason that we don't know about, we can plan for some, we can't plan for everything. But if we had a deputy there, we're at least getting closer to the standards of what we have on the road, patrolling the streets and keeping the county safe, licensed deputies.
All right. So if you want to be happy, don't go to the courthouse. You just
Or
don't.
don't get to
Unless you want to get married or adopt a child.
It's not a happy
Those are
place
happy
in
ones,
general.
yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Robust discussion. Let's see, we're at 6.4, approved proclamation and resolution for National Drug Court Month, May 2018, page 114. And attorney.
Thank you. This is one of the more pleasant duties of the county attorney's office. I have here with me today Commissioners Karen Heider, if she could come up here. Karen is the drug court coordinator. I know you've met her before, but we're actually doing this together. And we've prepared this agenda item to ask that you adopt the proclamation, because May is National Drug Court Month, and as we've put in the materials, our drug court's been operating since 2012, and Karen can speak if you have any questions to, how many people we've had, graduates. I would also like to say that on May 21st, we have organized through our Friends of Drug Court, which is a group of private individuals. Karen and myself are participating on that. But we're putting together a Friends of Drug Court Appreciation evening event. It's from 6, I'm going to make sure I get this right.
5 p.m. to 6:30.
Thank you. 5 p.m. to 6:30 at the History Center in the Wannock Room. And this is to thank all the individuals in our community, businesses, the public, for helping support our county's drug court. So we're inviting everyone to come. There'll be some specific invitations going out to various businesses and individuals who've really made a difference in the drug court, and it's a long list. So if you have any questions for Karen, she's a good font of information and has been working very. I can't say enough about the work that Karen Hyder does for our drug court. She's a great drug court coordinator and works so well with our participants and our team. So,
okay. Anybody have any questions? I do have a question. I'm not familiar with the drug court relapse phase. I thought if they, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, these people are in drug court or they go to jail. So when they reoffend, they still can go back into drug court? They're not?
So the relapse phase was designed not necessarily for a reoffense, but if they were having some drug use issues, not crimes don't necessarily come out of that, or convictions, I should say, don't necessarily come out of that. But if we see that they are going down that road again, we try to bring them back in. It's usually for about 6 to 12 months. And so that's something that Winona County has done. I don't know any other counties in Minnesota that are doing that right now. And a lot of other counties are looking at us and observing how we are incorporating that relapse phase into drug court. So far, we've had success with it. Getting a couple people. I think we've only had 4 or 5 so far in the relapse phase. And actually on the 17th of this month, we are giving a certificate of completion to one of those people in the relapse phase.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'd entertain a motion to adopt the proclamation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Jacob to adopt the proclamation for National Drug Court Month, May 2018. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved, and the proclamation reads, whereas there are now more than 3,000 treatment courts nationwide, including the Drug Court of Winona County, which has been in service to our community since October 2012. Treatment courts are the cornerstone of justice reform sweeping the nation. Treatment courts have served more than 1.4 million individuals. They are now recognized as the most successful justice system intervention in our nation's history. They save up to $27 for every dollar invested and up to $13,000 for every individual they serve. Treatment courts significantly improve substance use disorder treatment outcomes, substantially reduce addiction and related crime, and do so at less expense than any other criminal justice strategy. Treatment courts improve education, employment, housing, and financial stability, promote family reunification, reduce foster care placements, and increase the rate of addictive mothers delivering babies who are fully drug-free. Treatment courts facilitate community-wide partnerships, bringing together public safety and public health professionals. Treatment courts demonstrate that when one person rises out of substance abuse and crime, we all rise. The time has come to put a treatment court within reach of every eligible person in need. Therefore, be it resolved that the Winona County Board of Commissioners declares that Drug Court Month be established during the month of May 2018 in Winona County. Adopted this 8th day of May 2018. All right, thank you. So, and again, Attorney Simon, you said May 21 is the...
May 21, and each of you should be getting an invitation pretty soon. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, 6.5, receive monthly finance and budget update. Pat Muga, please.
I'm going to provide the update for the month of March. We'll start with the beginning cash balance in March and revenue funds is $11.8 million. Actual revenues were $789,000. Actual expenses were $2 million. Ending cash was $10.6 million. For the year, cash started out at 14.3. The actual revenues were 1.3, and the actual expenses were $5 million. And again, the ending cash was 10.6. The variance this year compared to last year is a 3.7 compared to a 3.6. Overall variance is a 5.9 compared to a 5.9. I do want to point out that community services is running a negative fund balance at right on top. I have $2.1 million. Any questions on that document? If not, I'll go to the summary. Summary starts out with cash at 19.6. Actual revenues were 5 million. Actual expenses were 10.8. Ending cash is 13.8, and the variance is 5.7 compared to the 5.9. Any questions on this document? If not, we'll go to the summary budget. I have actually handed out an additional summary budget because I had missed the human services. Cash of the year is at 25%. There are two areas that are actually over 25% at this point. One of them being the general fund is at 27.6, and the human services at 29.1. At this point, I also wanted to mention that our interest is $28,918, and we budgeted $150,000, which is 19%. And again, human services, there is running higher. We do have one of the areas that I know is running higher is the out-of-home placements is still running at a higher level, and that's been kind of a trend for the last couple of years. Any question on this document? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just make one interesting observation? In the out-of-home placements, I did read an article, and perhaps you all read it too, where we're number 6 in the nation for out-of-home placements, and we do substantially more than a number of other states do, because the idea is to keep the family together and such. But I know they do everything they can, but it's just an interesting note.
But the takeaway I got from that is that we're not doing it right for some reason. Taking more kids out of homes for some reason is not working. And other states have figured out something different than Minnesota. Minnesota has I guess Minnesota has a low tolerance, and maybe some of the other states have a higher tolerance for trying to work with the kids in the current situation. And yes, that article was interesting. Why Minnesota does that, change their protocols, but it isn't. We aren't seeing any great return on the process. Is the takeaway I got. So stay tuned. Unfortunately, it's an unfortunate set of circumstances we're in. All right, committee reports. Let's see, Commissioner Kavesi, you had an announcement?
I just want to announce that tomorrow is walk, ride, and bike to school. Well, walk and ride your bike to school day. So there's going to be a significantly higher number of students, all ages, with chaperones. But still, you need to be on the lookout for those little ones with their bikes or their walking. And that's going to be around all the schools because they're all participating. The other item actually is one that I wanted to raise as a possible agenda item for future agenda. I'm considering that we had recent news of the delay of County Road 129. I would like to ask Mr. Kramer to bring us the full background on that, and including what his timeline is for going forward. In a memo, he has accepted that he would do this, but I think we need to have it on public record, not just between him and I. So if I could get a second, I would like to add that to the agenda, to a future agenda.
I'll second.
Just an update on that?
An update with background and a timeline.
On that specific project?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Well, if it has any effect on the rest of 2018 or 2019, but I don't believe it does, but I don't know.
Well, we'll let Mr. Kramer, it does,
Right.
Because then we're allocating the funds for other projects, so it is changing some of the things.
Yeah,
because
he was
we're
saying
using
they
sales tax.
save the money, but
Right.
they don't, so they don't allocate it for other projects. But that's what we need to know.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Fritz, you'll convey that request? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Attorney Sonneman.
I just wanted to introduce our newest Assistant County Attorney, if Preston Selleck, come on up to the, I made him sit through the whole meeting, see if he would actually still be here. Preston is going to be doing a lot of our civil work, and he comes from the Public Defender's Office, where I came from one time. So he also was a Judge Advocate General in the Marine Corps, so JAG. So Preston, if you want to just say a little bit about yourself, but he's very welcome in our office, and he's already dug into a lot of contract work. So
As a Marine, he can go with our judges for their training for personal safety.
Lobbying for extra radio downstairs for me for court security purposes, but I haven't gotten one yet from Premier Security, just with the guards down there. But yeah, I started last Monday, started digging into some contracts that I've seen. I think a couple of requests too from Commissioner Fritz over here.
Administrator Fritz.
Administrator Fritz.
I
was taking notes, so we'll make that
All right.
a note.
Don't let it happen again.
We'll give you one time, yeah. I've done it before, too, though.
We have a high bar.
Okay. So, as I get more involved in things, you guys will have to probably deal with me more. But
Okay, all right. Well, welcome aboard.
thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
thank you.
Anything else? At this time, we need to adjourn to go into closed session.
I think we need to go into closed session first and adjourn after.
Recess into closed session.
Yes.
Make a motion to go into
Recess.
closed.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Minnesota statute 13D.05 as permitted by the county, by the attorney-client privileges to discuss with legal counsel recently filed Jerry Bigelow and John Beaver versus Kenneth Fritz in professional capacity as the Winona County Administrator and the Winona County lawsuit.
Okay, that was a motion.
Second.
I need a second. Okay, motion made by Commissioner Jacob, second by Commissioner Olson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved. We will be back.